Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise to support the Government's decision to use its Section 35 powers with respect to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill in Scotland. Now, like many other honourable members, I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to read this in full and in detail, so I will focus my remarks on a few key areas that I think are significantly important. Firstly, in paragraph 27, the Government rightly points out the bill does not create sufficient safeguards. And I think, indeed, the Government is very right to be concerned about fraudulent and malign applications, with the implications for child safeguarding. Now, this morning in the Education Select Committee, we had Professor Alexis Jay, who, of course, chaired the inquiry into institutional child sexual abuse. And it was harrowing to hear the stories of decades of child sexual abuse throughout institutions across this country. And there's one key feature of that abuse, which is that predators will exploit any loophole they can find to get access to children. And that is, I'm afraid, what will happen with this bill. We shouldn't be asking how easy is it for someone who's uncomfortable with their sex to obtain a GRC. We should be asking how easy is it for a predator to get access to children. And I'm afraid this bill would make it vastly easier for a predator to get access to children, to change their sex, to change their gender, with an eye to exploiting loopholes of accessing children and women in particular. No, I've only got 4 minutes. So. The naivety that this has been written with is absolutely astounding and hugely worrying. I think also the reduction of the age limit to 16 is a significant safeguarding risk. The human brain does not end development until about the age of 25. You can't drive a car when you're 16. There are an awful lot of things that you're not allowed to do legally when you're 16 because you cannot assess the long-term implications on your welfare. Changing your legal gender with a potential route to long-term changes to your fertility, your sexual function, your health is not suitable for 16-year-olds. There's a huge safeguarding risk. Paragraphs 30 and 48 mention membership on the grounds of sex and single-sex spaces. Sex Matters did a report recently looking at the impact on single-sex spaces and the ability of men to access them through changing their gender. The one thing women say is, I never went back. I never went back to that swimming pool. I never went back to that counselling class. For many women, the dignity of being a women-only space, of knowing that there are no men that are going to be there, is so important. We will see a chilling effect on important single-sex rights if this goes through. And I think, as a woman, I fully understand the threats to dignity and safety that this poses, because it will change the social contract. In this country, we recognise that in toilets and changing rooms, in public spaces, there are areas where only women are allowed. I had an experience recently in a restaurant where a man dressed as a woman walked into the toilets. I was on my own in the toilets. He stood behind me and stared at me into the mirror, looking at me in my eyes. Now, I have no idea if he intended me any harm, but my instinct, my evolved instinct as a woman, was to be frightened, because unlike almost any other species, women are far less powerful than men. We can't defend ourselves. That's why we have... No, it's a fact. The difference in strength between men and women is phenomenal. That's why we have separate sex categories for sport. Women are evolved to be wary of men in intimate spaces. That's why we have single-sex spaces. They must continue to exist for the safety and privacy of women. This threatens that social contract. Finally, it threatens the understanding of our law, which should be based on fact. And you cannot change your sex any more than you can change your place of birth or who your parents are. Now, I fully understand the complex arguments involved in this, and we should treat it with compassion. But if the law is not based on fact, then how can we trust the law? That is why the Government is absolutely right to serve this notice.
Order. Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Goodness me, that speech was probably one of the worst transphobic dog whistle speeches that I've heard in an awful long time. The idea of linking trans people with predators, frankly, is disgusting, and you should be ashamed.
No, calm down. Yes.
No.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Way to you, or anyone else, to the honourable member, Now, on the substance of this, ignoring that horrible speech that we have just heard, actually...
Order, Peter Bottomley.
Did the Chair hear anything transphobic in the previous speech?
I have to say to the Father of the House that different colleagues, different members of this House are going to interpret speeches in different ways. And I suggest that what we do is move on quickly. I think the honourable gentleman needs to calm down, moderate his language, and move on to the substance of the debate. Otherwise, I will ask him to resume his seat. Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is difficult when we're talking about these emotional matters, but the reality of this is, this Section 35 is the new Tories' Section 28. It is their continuation of a war against a group of people, their culture war, that they want to pursue. And they think it will advantage them in the polls. That's what the Australian Conservatives thought as well. That's what the Republicans in the US thought. But I trust it will not, because the people do not like the bigotry that we hear from the other side. So, what... It is bigotry. I will give way. It is bigotry what we just heard.
I recognise the individual feels...
Could I just say to the honourable gentleman that we are very short of time. I hope that if he takes an intervention, he will stick to the 4 minutes. Alicia Cairns.
I recognise that the honourable gentleman feels very strongly about this, but I would ask him to caution labelling a party as solely one thing, because it is the Conservative Party colleagues who have led for a conversion therapy ban that today has been announced. When I was elected, no other MP talked about it for 7 months, and we have today delivered it. So I would caution him, please do not label all members of certain sides of the House to be transphobic or homophobic, and I would also challenge that anyone should be labelled that within this House.
I will say that there are some very honourable members on all sides of the House, including on that side, who have resisted the moves from the government when trans conversion therapy was removed, pushed for it to get back in, and their work is to be applauded.